Today on an all-new Dr. Phil.
5 persons, including actress Sharon Tate, were found dead.
They were callous killings ordered by Charles Manson, a controlling leader, over a small devoted group he called his family.
The youngest follower speaks out.
It was my role to do his bidding.
Inside the Manson family.
You say Charles Manson raped you, beat you, passed you around for sex.
A daytime exclusive.
Charlie threatened to hang me upside down and skin me alive in front of the group.
Plus,
It has been 31 years since Christopher disappeared without a trace.
He vanished from his crib and home in the middle of the night and is still missing.
The police accused my mother of smothering Christopher and throwing him in a lake.
After Christopher was abducted, she says her father made a surprise confession to police. Do you think that your brother is alive somewhere in America today and doesn't know who he was? Let's do it.
Have a good show, everybody. Here we go.
This is a safe place to talk about hard things.
Stand by. We'll count you down.
Today's going to be a changing day in your life.
5, 4.
I am not giving up on you. You may remember this. If not, you've at least read about it. It was the 1960s. It was a time of free love, sex, and rock and roll. Now, Dianne Lake says her parents were enmeshed in the psychedelic culture and turned their home into a commune for hippies. She claims she was 14 years old when her father introduced her to marijuana and LSD. Now, by the end of the school year, Dianne says her parents dropped out of society and moved her family into a bread truck to live as free people. A few months later, Dianne would meet Charles Manson and his followers. Now, armed with an emancipation letter that her parents gave her earlier, Dianne joined the family. Dianne spent nearly 2 years living with the Manson family, where she was told about unspeakable acts as his youngest follower. Well, she's here today in a daytime exclusive to tell her story on what happened inside the family. But first, here's a look at Charles Manson, the manipulative mastermind behind the series of murders that happened in 1969.
It was 2 nights of savage, high-profile murders that shocked Los Angeles the summer of 1969.
The murders were probably the most bizarre in the recorded annals of American crime.
They were callous killings ordered by Charles Manson, a controlling leader, over a small devoted group he called his family.
They were young kids from average American homes, fairly good backgrounds. Their credo was to murder as many people as they could. Every member of his family, before they met him, had already dropped out of society. He reprogrammed them to be his slaves and to be his followers. So I would say that sex, drugs, and sermonizing to his family on a day-to-day basis were the main techniques he used to gain control.
A humanity where Manson believed he could trigger an apocalyptic race war between blacks and whites.
Whatever they do is what they do.
He called it Helter Skelter, a term he took from the name of a Beatles song.
We have a weird homicide.
On August 9th, 1969, Manson ordered the killings.
5 persons, including actress Sharon Tate, were found dead.
The family members went to this Benedict Canyon home and violently murdered actress Sharon Tate, her unborn child, and 4 friends. The next evening, they tortured and stabbed to death Lino and Rosemary LaBianca in their Los Feliz home. After a 9-month trial, Manson and his followers were convicted of first-degree murder.
The very name Manson has become a metaphor for evil. He has come to represent the dark and malignant side of humanity. Some people are just bad human beings, and Manson is one of them.
Well, Dianne says she will never forget the time she spent with Manson and she would later testify against the cult leader, helping to put him in prison forever.
My mom met Charlie, and she gave him my picture. Even though my parents didn't introduce me to Charlie, they gave me their blessing. 6 weeks after I met Charlie and the girls. The girls who approached me were Lynette Fromm and Patty Krenwinkel. The girls came running up to me exclaiming, "Charlie, Charlie, Diane's here, Diane's here." I was just 14. Charlie was funny, impish, playful. Charlie made me feel very much a woman and loved and adored. When I first had sex with Charlie, I was 14. It was very gentle, it was very loving. A little more than a year after I met Charlie, he started to become unraveled. The first time I heard about the murders was from Tex Watson. Tex Watson showed me the headlines. You know, he was like proud. Once I found out about the murders, I felt like I was a liability. Charlie threatened to hang me upside down and skin me alive in front of the group, and I interpreted that as I was not to leave. When I first heard Leslie Van Houten tell about her role in the murders, I again was just in horrified shock. I stayed more out of a sense of fear than loyalty. It was frightening to testify against him face to face because I didn't want him to be angry with me, and I didn't want him to orchestrate some retaliation. I had an epiphany that now was the time for me to write Member of the Family, my story of Charles Manson.
Dianne, it's good to meet you. You wrote this book now instead of 5 years ago or 5 years from now. Why?
My children are old enough to understand, and my husband of 35 years died 3.5 years ago, and so I had to reinvent myself. And I had this epiphany that now was the right time to write this book, to bring closure and perhaps tell a cautionary tale.
Now, tell me about this relationship with your parents. You at one point, you say they kind of drop out, you get in this bread truck, you head out, you wind up in Santa Monica. Why give you a letter of emancipation? What was their mindset in doing that?
I had asked them.
Why? Why did you want to do that?
It was really hard living in a bread truck with 5 people.
And you say your dad introduced you to marijuana and LSD.
Yes.
That's odd for a dad to do with a child, to give him LSD. Did that strike you as odd at the time?
No.
Just seemed like you didn't know.
Well, we were, you know, embarking on this counterculture experience, and it seemed perfectly normal. I was looking forward to trying it.
Yeah. So let's fast forward. How did you meet Charles Manson? How did that come to pass?
I met Charles Manson through a couple of friends, and they took me to a party. We want you to meet this, you know, groovy person and his girls. I walked in, and a couple of the girls ran up to me and, Charlie, Diane's here, Diane's here. And I was totally in shock. I didn't even know they knew me.
Looking back, were you targeted at that point? Were they wanting to get you into the family?
I have no idea.
Why would they know your name?
Coincidentally, my Charlie and company had gone to visit the hog farm, which is where my parents were living, in that commune. And my mom really liked him, and she gave him my picture and told him that I was in San Francisco, so if he went to San Francisco to look for me.
What was your first impression when you met him?
He was very adorable, impish, funny. He's small, he's short, played music. The girls all adored him.
He was charming with you to start with.
He was charming, yeah.
Tell me about the first time he hit you.
The first time he hit me, I said something that he didn't like or asked him the wrong question at the wrong time, and he smacked me.
Was that a shock to you?
It was, but I felt disciplined. You know, I felt like I had spoke out of turn, and so that was what I deserved. That's how I felt at the time.
We'll talk about how Dianne found out about the Manson murders and her involvement in putting Charles Manson away when we come back. Charles Manson raped you, beat you, passed you around for sex.
It was my duty to do his bidding. He was a magic maker.
And later,
The police shot open the door and I had a gun in my face.
do you realize that you could have been one decision away from this interview happening in prison right now?
Charlie would often tell us that he was Jesus. He would tell us that his name, Man's Son, was significant. Man, Son. He thought he was the Son of God. One time on acid, Charlie had a crucifixion experience. Charlie would reenact the crucifixion. We were doing acid as well. So when he talked about looking at the nails in his hands and feet, it was very easy to imagine the hands and the feet bleeding.
Well, Dianne Lake says she was a, quote, naive, lonely, love-starved 14-year-old girl who felt an attraction and deep connection to Charles Manson when she joined what's called his family. Now, at the time, Dianne says she never thought the man who oozed self-confidence and sex appeal and convinced her that he was the Messiah would later turn out to be the monster the world knows today. Now, Dianne has written about her experience in a book titled Member of the Family, My Story of Charles Manson, which is in bookstores now. You talk about in the book, and so I'll talk about it some now, that Charles Manson raped you, beat you, passed you around to older men for sex. Did you question any of that at the time, or were you so pulled into this that you saw that as your role and your duty?
It was my role and it was my duty to do his bidding, and it did happen, but it wasn't, I didn't feel that it was frequent at the time.
You talk about your belief that he was the Messiah. Tell me about that.
He was a magic maker. He could postulate, he talked about postulating things. He had lots of verses, from the Bible, from Scientology, from very, many disciplines. And he kept reiterating his name, Man, Son. We believed it. We came to believe it in a kind of a mind groupthink.
Well, you spoke about it very clearly in the book. You said, quote, there have been many false prophets besides Charlie, but even now, all these years later, I find it hard to explain what it was like to actually believe that he was a kind of Messiah. It's an incredible concept, totally impossible to fathom, that the person you're standing next to or having sex with is somehow related to God. Let's just talk about the first time you became aware of the murders. What was the first time you learned that a murder had taken place?
We were getting ready to go up to Death Valley. And so we were in a Lancia. I was with Tex. And I came back to the property, and he had newspapers with the headlines, Tate LaBianca. And he slapped it with his hand, his fist, and said, I did this. Charlie told me to. And that's the first time I even knew that those murders had existed, because I didn't watch television, didn't read newspapers. So it was a double shock.
So first, you didn't know they had happened, period, let alone that they had anything to do with the family.
Correct.
Okay, and so this Tex Watson slaps these down, says, I did this, Charlie told me to do this, and I did this. Were you shocked?
Totally shocked and scared and didn't know what to do.
Tell me about Leslie Van Houten, she comes to you shortly after with regard to the other murders, correct?
Yes.
Tell me about that.
We were hiding in the desert, and one night she told me, along with Susan Atkins, and Patty Krenwinkel, what they had experienced, what they had done. And it was kind of, what struck me was that it was kind of gleeful. I mean, it was like, again, they were, kind of proud of what they had done, which was extremely scary and shocking.
God, I can only imagine. Now, Dianne says what she feared the most about testifying against Charlie Manson was not his intimidation and threats. You'll be surprised at what she says really scared her when we come back.
I was in jail in a cell with the other girls, and we were all reminded to not say anything.
How did the police and the DA finally get you to cooperate?
And later, her baby brother was kidnapped more than 30 years ago.
You think that your brother is alive somewhere in America today?
During the trial, I was not aware of the antics that Charlie had been pulling in the courtroom. Mr. Bugliosi told me that Charlie would try to rattle me with his antics. At the time of the trial, I was 17, and I had been with Charlie since 14. I had seen him go through many changes. During my time with Charlie, he had beaten me, raped me, he'd abused me, and threatened my life. During the trial, remembering what he had done to me made it easier for me to testify against him.
Well, Dianne says she was coming undone as some of the girls in the Manson family discussed the gruesome Sharon Tate and La Bianca murders in 1969, like they were talking about makeup and boys they liked in school. But Dianne says as a follower, she was too confused and too programmed to leave, and even refused to cooperate with the police after she and Charles Manson were captured. By the way, this is all talked about and discussed in her book, Member of the Family, the story of Charles Manson, life inside his cult and the darkness that ended the 60s. So how were you and Charles Manson eventually captured? How did this come down?
We were hiding in the desert. I was washing my hair, and the police shot open the door, and I had a gun in my face.
Yeah. Why did you refuse to cooperate when you were interrogated by the police?
I was in jail in a cell with the other girls, and we were all reminded to not say anything.
So how did the police and the DA finally get you to cooperate?
After being in jail for a few months and having good food and no drugs, and they still, they don't know how old I am. Just before going into the grand jury, the bailiff asks name, age, address, the normal stuff, and I was now ready to tell them my real name, my real age, and I want my mommy.
Do you look back now and realize that you could have been one decision away from this interview happening in prison right now?
Yes. I feel like I am here by the grace of God.
Yeah.
That I survived and prevailed.
How'd you feel when the guilty verdict came down with Charles Manson and the others?
I thought it was the right decision.
Have you had any contact with any of them since then? They've not tried to reach you, write you, message you in any way?
No.
Do you feel any pull towards him at all now as you look at these pictures?
No.
In your book, you mentioned that you most fear your good memories when you were giving your testimony. What did you mean by that?
When I was looking at testifying against him face to face, I felt the most vulnerability in remembering those early days where I felt so loved and adored and welcomed and safe.
It wasn't the intimidation, a cold stare, it was that you remembered that good feeling, that good time.
Yes.
Well, Dianne, thank you so much. Her book is Member of the Family, My Story of Charles Manson. It's available in bookstores and online, and it is a compelling read. Dianne, thank you so much.
Thank you.
All right, next we're going to meet a woman whose brother vanished without a trace when he was just 7 months old. We'll be right back.
The mysterious disappearance of Christopher Abeta made news in early August that continued for weeks. He vanished from his crib and home in the middle of the night.
I think everyone, including the police, were in a state of disbelief.
Closed captioning provided by Denise says her brother Christopher was just 7 months old when he was snatched from his crib 3 feet from his parents' bed while they slept. The story made headlines and was considered the most high-profile missing persons case in Colorado Springs in 1986. Take a look.
It's been 3 days since 7-month-old Christopher was reported stolen from his southwest Colorado Springs home.
Springs police say they're prepared to immediately follow up any promising leads. Bernice Abeta hopes people will call with anything.
We need him desperately. I can't live without him. I want whoever has him, please bring him back to me. I need him worse than you could ever imagine.
The mysterious disappearance of Christopher Abeta made news in early August that continued for weeks. He vanished from his crib and home in the middle of the night and is still missing.
Whenever we have searched it as best it can be searched and all bases have been covered on it, then we'll stop. But until then, we'll keep searching it.
There are 4 volumes of information on the case, and detectives add more all the time.
Right now, they're following up a number of the telephone leads that we've received as a result of the media publicity that's been generated. Just my feeling that somebody out there knows something. I do feel that we will recover this child.
Our main intent is to get Christopher back. That's all we want. Why he was taken, who took him, I think is secondary. We can deal with that later, but all we want is Christopher back.
It has been 31 years since Christopher disappeared without a trace, and his sister Denise says the search has never stopped.
My brother Christopher was taken July 15th, 1986. From that day forward, it was all about finding Christopher. Christopher was the youngest out of the 7 of us. We were all 15 years or older than him. That night, I volunteered to give him his bottle.
This was my room right here, and right next door was my parents' master bedroom.
The search has never stopped.
My brother Christopher was taken July 15th, 1986. From that day forward, it was all about finding Christopher. Christopher was the youngest out of the 7 of us. We were all 15 years or older than him. That night, I volunteered to give him his bottle.
This was my room right here, and right next door was my parents' master bedroom.
My mom had the crib in her room.
Just about 3 feet away from my parents' bed was Christopher's crib, which was right here.
That evening, I had a sister who called and said she may be spending the night at her friend's house. My mom, in the back of her mind, she remembered thinking, I'll leave the door unlocked just in case she comes home. Early the next morning, I heard my mother frantically yelling for Christopher. She pushed open my door thinking I may have him. My mom was running around the house looking for Christopher.
This door was open when we woke up. So that was another thing my mom saw and knew, someone had been in the house.
Within about 10 minutes, the police were called. Everyone, including the police, were in a state of disbelief. The police accused my mother of smothering Christopher and throwing him in a lake nearby our house. Watching my mom agonize over those first couple days was just heartbreaking. My mom had thought that whoever took Christopher was someone who wanted a baby. My mother secretly looked through obituaries to see if anyone had lost a baby. Christopher's disappearance became my mother's life. My mother continued to search for Christopher right up until her death.
Well, Denise, I'm glad to meet you. I wish we were talking about something else. How old were you at the time?
15 years old.
We always say that hindsight is 20/20. As you look back on it over all of this time, has there been a clue? Has there been something that has pointed you in the right direction?
After Christopher's disappearance, we were getting tips and leads and just inundated with someone saying they thought they saw him here or there. So my parents were following up on everything that they could. But I believe, in retrospect, I look back and what was different about that night than any other night. My father and mother had been separated, and it was the first night my dad spent the night back at home after their brief separation.
Right. And the door was left unlocked that night.
Yes.
So what this boils down to is somebody came in from the outside, walked into the house, went into the bedroom where they were sleeping, picked this sleeping baby up from the crib, and out the door.
Right.
Is your theory that this tragically is an abduction and murder, or do you think that your brother is alive somewhere in America today and doesn't know who he was?
I don't know the answer to that. My mom had looked for Christopher for 31 years, and it was a theory that he was still alive and she wasn't going to stop until she found him. She passed away this year, and I wonder the reason we haven't found him in 31 years is because he was murdered.
Next, we're going to hear from Denise's father and find out why he says police honed in on his wife and refused to look at other suspects. We'll be right back.
Christopher was about 3 feet away. I never heard anything. The entire family ended up taking a lie detector test. They said everybody passed, but my wife, Bernice.
Closed captioning provided by...
My father had an affair, and my parents had been separated for a few months, and they had been reconciling. The night of Christopher's disappearance was the first night that he spent the night back at home. My father confessed to the police of his affair the day of the abduction. My mom had been unaware of the actual affair. The reason they were separated is because she had an idea something was going on. She was hurt by this revelation, but she moved past it quickly. Finding Christopher was all that mattered.
Well, Denise says her parents were separated when her brother vanished without a trace 31 years ago. Now, after Christopher was abducted, she says her father made a surprise confession to police. But Denise's father, Gil, says police honed in on his wife, Bernice, and she became the prime suspect to the exclusion of all others.
The night of my son's Christopher disappearance, my wife and I went to bed at around 10:30, 11 o'clock. Christopher was about 3 feet away in the room. I never heard anything. We had 6 children and Christopher was our 7th. There was always plenty of activity in our house. The police arrived in several cars. And one of the reasons why I told the police that I was having an affair is that it might be tied into Christopher. I was having an affair about 2 years. My niece was mad about the affair, but we got through it. We then decided to do whatever we had to do to find our child. The entire family ended up taking a lie detector test. They said everybody passed, but my wife, Bernice, she was medicated and distressed over the whole thing, and she couldn't pass it. The police, they used it for 2 years to focus on Bernice. The police and FBI and private eyes never came up with anything of any substance. They never followed up on calls and they never kept us up to date. So we reached the point where we said we will do it ourselves. There's been lots of leads through the years. We went all over the world looking for him. To this day, we spent about $1 million trying to find Christopher. We suffered a disappointment, but we kept going. We don't know whether he's alive or dead.
Great. Did you ever go in your mind to the place that you thought your mother might have done something to your little brother in retaliation to your father?
Never, never. That was the advantage that we had over the police department, is that we knew everyone in that household. We had nothing to do with it.
At some point, they thought that he maybe had been put in the lake, that he was at the bottom of the lake. They drained the lake, right?
Correct.
They did everything they could, and there was nothing there.
No.
Well, Lieutenant Howard Black of Colorado Springs Police Department says even though Christopher's case is 31 years old, it still remains active. And Lieutenant Black is here with us today. Lieutenant, thank you for being here. And
You're welcome.
What can you tell us about it?
Well, these cases never go dead. I mean, we are constantly looking for tips, information. To date, as I go back and review this case, we've been in contact with over 180 police departments from around the country, following up leads, doing interviews, collecting DNA. So these cases are so important to us because they're so important to the family. This is a case that's obviously 30 plus years old. We're looking for just any bit of information that can make a difference, that can have an impact to move this case forward.
Here's a statement of the Public Information Office, 4th Judicial District Attorney's Office, September 26, 2017. This is a tragic, unsolved missing child case that remains in the investigative stage in the capable hands of the Colorado Springs Police Department. So the DA's office has it on their radar. They're communicating with the police department. So even though this is 31 years old, you've stayed active enough and you guys are focused on it enough that if the phone rings down there, it's not like, what do you everybody knows what's going on, and that this case is on everybody's mind, right?
That's correct. We have a detective, a lead detective that's assigned to this case that continues to follow every lead that comes in. Again, from DNA swabs to doing interviews around the country. So that's one of the things that is so important, to have these kinds of conversations, to just jog maybe someone's memory. Or someone who has had guilt for such a long period of time, to be able to come forward and give us just the smallest piece of information that might move this case forward.
Yeah. Denise says her mother, Bernice, continued her search for her son until she passed away earlier this year, but she left behind a special message for Christopher. We'll hear what she had to say next. Denise says her mother, Bernice, continued searching for her son until she passed away from cancer in February of this year. She never gave up hope that he is alive, and she left a special message for him after she was diagnosed with cancer.
Christopher, I want to tell you, if I'm not here, you couldn't even imagine how much your whole family has loved you and missed you. It was the most devastating and horrific thing that would have ever happened to us. You were the highlight of our family. You made me so happy the time I had with you. And then, of course, waking up and seeing you're gone just hurt our whole family. We were determined to get you back, and that's what we've worked on for all these years. I don't think there's anything else we could have done. Whatever your choices have been in life, I just want you to be happy. I don't want to ask anything of you because I realize you're 30 years old. You do have your life. I just want to make sure you know how much you've been a part of our life even after you left. I'm not sure what to believe in after I go. I'm hoping that I'll be able to see you. And if I do leave and I'm not here, I hope it's within my power to be able to help someone find you. I know that you're okay and you're all right, and I love you.
Well, that's got to be difficult for you. I mean, even she's leaving a message for him even after she's gone. She never gave up hope, right?
Right, right. And I think that's where it's difficult, because she was her son's biggest advocate, and so now that she's gone, I'm still dealing with some of the grief of her being gone. And then I was facilitating
for the last 10 years, a lot of the search with my brother's disappearance, but she's not here with me to be able to do that.
Yeah. If you have information regarding the disappearance of Christopher, who is now 31 years old, with brown hair and blue eyes, contact the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children at 1-800-843-5678 or the Colorado Springs Police Department at 719-444-7000. And what you're looking at now is his baby picture and a computer-generated image based on his facial structure of what he might look like today. So please help out if there's any way you can. Closed captioning provided by... Before we get back to the show, I would like to check in with Jesse Palmer, host of Daily Mail TV, an exciting, one-of-a-kind TV show that is already making waves for its unique mix of breaking news, pop culture, and showbiz buzz. Now, Jesse, I hear that you have an exclusive interview in the works for Friday. Is that right?
That is right, Dr. Phil. We've got an exclusive interview with former Dynasty actress Catherine Oxenberg. Now, Oxenberg's 26-year-old daughter, India, went to a 5-day intensive seminar conducted by a self-help organization called Nexium. And while on the surface, the organization seems to be a great thing, its founder, Keith Raniere, seems somehow to be able to get a hold on the people who sign on. They become his loyal followers, especially women. Now, Catherine claims that this is actually a cult and that her daughter has been brainwashed and even branded.
When you say branded, you mean branded?
Yeah, Dr. Phil, like physically branded, like something to the skin burning her flesh. It's unbelievable details here.
Oh, wow. So how was India brainwashed, according to Catherine?
Well, Catherine heard from a former member that her daughter is a ringleader in the S&M subgroup and that Raniere has the woman practically starved to get the look that he's attracted to before he actually has sex with them.
Oh, wow. Well, I didn't see that one coming. So how does Catherine describe her daughter's physical and psychological health?
Well, she got word that India wasn't looking all that well, and then when she finally spoke to her daughter back then, India actually confessed that she was losing her hair and also said that she hadn't had a period in a year.
So what steps has Catherine taken to help her get back on her feet?
Catherine held an intervention with her daughter on May 30th. The intervention, it didn't work. And now India won't even speak to her mother. Understandably, Catherine is very heartbroken about all of this, and obviously she wants her daughter back.
Well, I can well imagine it is not easy to get those people away from that mindset and back in contact with all their support systems. Okay, Jesse, anything else you have coming up?
We've got a Mary J. Blige exclusive. You're going to be shocked when you hear how much money she owes the government. This is a big number. I'm talking about a lot of zeros, Dr. Phil.
Well, Jesse, that sounds really interesting. I cannot wait. That's coming up tomorrow and Friday on Daily Mail TV. I want to thank all of my guests today. A special thanks to Lieutenant Howard Black from Colorado Springs Police Department and author Dianne Lake. We want to thank you for being here and talking about your experiences. You can get a copy of Dianne's book, Member of the Family, My Story of Charles Manson, in bookstores and online now. We'll see you next time.